From insane people hitching a ride only to end up murdering a man's entire family, to a man kidnapping a woman to keep her as a slave, we take a look at 10 of the creepiest hitchhiking stories. Number 10. The abduction of Colleen Stan. Cameron Hooker, along with his wife Janice and their baby, were driving in their blue van in 1977 when they came upon 20-year-old hitchhiker Colleen Stan. She felt safe getting into the van because the entire family was also there. Hooker proceeded to drive to an isolated area where he pulled off the road and put a knife to Colleen's throat. It seems that Hooker had some violent bondage fantasies, so his wife Janice, in order to spare herself from these episodes, relented and allowed him to capture a slave. Some of the horrendous conditions Colleen was forced to endure were being fed cold scraps, being sexually abused, and tortured. She was given a small bedpan for bodily functions and locked in a tiny box beneath the couple's bed for 23 hours a day. This lasted for years. There were times during the summer when it reached over 100 degrees inside the box. Hooker psychologically abused Colleen as well, leading her to believe that a powerful organization called The Company was watching her, and if she attempted to escape, they would torture her and her family. She was banned from speaking without permission, assigned a slave name, and had to sign herself into slavery for life. Number 9. The Orange Sock Murders. In Breckenridge, Colorado in 1982, two separate women at two separate locations at two separate times on the same night were abducted and murdered by a very brazen killer. Hitchhiking was pretty much a daily occurrence in Breckenridge because it was known as a safe community. 29-year-old Bobby Jo Oberholzer phoned her husband Jeff on the evening of January 6th to let him know she would get a ride home from friends because she was hanging out with them at a local pub. The next morning, finding that she had never made it home, husband Jeff went searching for her. Eventually, his wife's body was found in a remote field, where she had been shot to death. Found nearby her body was an orange sock that did not belong to her. 13 miles away and 6 months later, another body was discovered in a wooded area, this time that of missing 21-year-old Annette K. Schnee. She had been shot to death after being sexually assaulted. Annette, coincidentally, was wearing the matching sock from the murder scene of Bobby Jo Oberholzer. Number 8. 3 indiscriminate murders. Gary Sampson posed as a hitchhiker in 2001 to carjack and murder 3 helpless people. Oh, by the way, Gary Sampson is a convicted bank robber and all-around bad guy. During the course of a week and across 2 different states, all 3 carjacking victims were murdered. 69-year-old Philip McCloskey was the first victim. After being picked up, Sampson pulled a knife and forced McCloskey to drive to a secluded area. He was then tied up with a belt and stabbed 24 times. The youngest victim was 19-year-old Jonathan Rizzo. Rizzo, in similar fashion, was forced to drive to a secluded area. He was then tied to a tree, gagged, and killed. 58-year-old Robert Whitney was the third victim. Although the murders were committed in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, Sampson eventually turned himself in Vermont. Number 7. The Albert Brust Abductions. Fort Lauderdale police heard a horrifying story in July of 1973. 15-year-old runaway Mary Ellen Jones had been hitchhiking with her boyfriend, 16-year-old Mark Watson. A middle-aged man named Eric picked them up and held them at gunpoint while they performed sex acts so he could take photographs. In an attempt to escape, Mark tried to grab Eric's gun, but was then shot 3 times. For the next 24 hours, Mary was held captive. She was repeatedly raped and kept chained up inside a makeshift soundproof torture chamber. In a surprising turn of events, Mary was then let go, but Eric warned her not to tell anybody what had happened. Mary, nevertheless, went to the police, who then contacted the girl's mother. Mary's mother told the police that she was a pathological liar, and as a result, her story was completely ignored. They took her statement with complete disbelief. Number 6. Murder on the Victorian border. On the Victorian side of the Victoria-South Australian border, the bodies of 2 teenage outcasts, John Lee and Fiona Burns, were found viciously stabbed in some grasslands in 1990. They were last seen hitchhiking along the Western Highway. The pair frequented rough hangout spots like youth hostels and pinball parlors where drugs and trouble are found, and were habitual runaways. Many feared that an opportunistic truck driver had picked them up. Fiona's mother, however, was suspicious that their deaths could be linked to an occult group. Police even investigated a possible link between another mysterious case of an Australian backpacker murderer named Ivan Milat. This particular case, though, remains a mystery, as police in Victoria have not charged anyone with the murders. Number 5. Lydia, the Vanishing Lady. According to the story, a young woman named Lydia went to Raleigh to go to a dance with her boyfriend on a rainy night in 1923. Their car collided with another car at a narrow underpass as they drove home to High Point on Highway 70. Lydia, who happened to be wearing a white evening gown that night, was killed instantly. In the years since, numerous drivers have reported sightings of a female hitchhiker at that particular location wearing a white evening gown. One motorist, Burke Hardison, was driving near the underpass one night when he saw a girl in a white evening gown calling for help. The frantic woman claimed her mother would be worried, so she needed to get home to High Point. When she provided her address to Hardison, he drove her to the house, and when he arrived, the girl had completely disappeared. Number 4. The murder of the Prendergast family. Thomas Prendergast from El Cajon, California, picked up Carl Alfred Eder, a 16-year-old runaway hitchhiker from New York, in November of 1958. Prendergast felt sorry for Eder because he was homeless, so he invited Eder to stay with him and his family until he could get back on his feet. This decision would prove to be regretful. When Prendergast returned home from work on December 12th, Eder was waiting outside for him and asked for a ride to San Diego. After dropping Eder off at a service station, Prendergast went home only to make a horrifying discovery. Lois, Prendergast's wife, had been shot to death, and their 4 children, including a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old, had all been murdered with a hunting knife. Eder was caught, charged, and convicted of the murder, and was given 2 life sentences. He managed to escape from prison in 1974 and has never been recaptured. Before leaving prison, Eder left a note saying, quote, "I've done enough time and I'm leaving." Number 3. The Valhalla hitchhiker. In a similar fashion to Lydia, the Vanishing Lady in North Carolina, there is a famous urban legend about a vanishing phantom hitchhiker in South Carolina as well. The local legend states that a ghostly male figure, wearing a dark all-weather coat, has been seen near the city of Valhalla, South Carolina, haunting Highway 107 for several decades. Stories vary depending on which direction the vehicle is traveling. He often asks to be dropped off at either Moody Springs or the Piedmont Overlook. Regardless of the final destination, once the mystery man arrives, he exits the vehicle and vanishes without saying a word. Number 2. The murder of Philip Fraser. 25-year-old Philip Fraser had plans to attend Evergreen State College in Washington in 1988. The native of Anchorage, Alaska, left on June 14th to drive to Evergreen to complete his enrollment. Before crossing the border into the United States, Fraser stopped at a cafe in the rural community of 40 Mile Flats. An unidentified male hitchhiker asked Fraser for a ride, and although Fraser initially turned down the man's request and started to drive away, he suddenly changed his mind, stopped the car, and let the man in. For Fraser, this would be the last time he was seen alive. His body was found in a remote gravel pit near the community of Stewart on July 27th. His passport, his birth certificate, and many of his other personal possessions were never recovered. Number 1. The Castration Murders. 22-year-old Marty Shook left his mother's home in Sparks, Nevada on June 12, 1982 to travel to Colorado. He set out on foot and planned to hitchhike all the way there. Near Daniels Canyon in Wasatch County, Utah, a fly fisherman discovered Marty's nude body 2 days later. He had been shot in the head with a .38 caliber pistol. In a disturbing turn of events, Marty's genitals were discovered to have been removed and were suspiciously missing from the scene. Marty's murder would become a cold case for 7 years, until in 1989, authorities connected it to the murder of another hitchhiker from the previous year. Although the two murders are considered linked, both of them remain unsolved. If you like this video, why not hit that like button, and remember to hit the subscribe button for more videos every 2 days.